full of tech content and full of opportunities to network and to learn from each other. Before I start, please let me introduce myself. My name is Sebastian. I'm with S&S Media, the company organizing this conference, and I care for content strategy and the content of all our conferences together, of course, with the editorial team and advisory boards and many people who support us bringing together those great conference programs. This is a conference. If you book machine learning conference, you get at the same time the voice conference because it's just co-hosted. Yeah? And at the same time, if you booked voice conference, you can also visit all the sessions of the machine learning conference. So right here on site, both conferences represent just 2 tracks of one integrated conference experience. Yeah, this is really important. So we made this decision to bring those 2 conference brands together because, of course, it is obvious that there's kinds of an overlap in topics. Yeah, when it comes to chatbox, when it comes to human and machine interaction, all these things belong together in some sense. And I'm pretty sure that if you booked voice conference, machine learning conference sessions might be an added value for you and vice versa. That's at least the idea we had while bringing together those conferences. And if you have been there already last year, we did the same thing last year, and the reaction and the feedback from the audience was very, very positive. So when we speak about things like machine learning, algorithms, and voice interaction between humans and machines, we speak about innovation, digital transformation, all those big words. And I just wanted to share some thoughts with you about exactly that, because normally when it comes to the big term of digital disruptions, one says, oh wow, this is a high level, this is something new, this is a high level of disruption. Wow, the Tesla with the autopilot is just there, yeah, and it is just working to some degree. Or I don't know, 10 years ago or more than 10 years ago, the iPhone, it just emerged, yeah. And that's maybe that's a little bit the naive perception of disruption, because if you look, for example, and I quoted this already, this was a tweet from last summer. So it was one of the German leading parties, or the party of Chancellor Merkel. They were talking about, oh, we don't like the idea of carbon tax on the one hand, but we need to invest in innovation. And they said, well, innovation is represented by the idea of air taxis. Air taxis. This is great, because this is, I would say, this is kind of a childish, naive, and old-fashioned idea of making things modern and new and making a leap forward, a big leap forward into the future, because normally disruption or innovation or change is more going, of course, like that. Yeah. So suddenly, of course, if you are right here at the right hand, then it feels like, okay, oh, things have changed dramatically. But of course, you know, because you are building that kind of stuff. Yeah. You know, it's hard work, and it's a step-by-step approach. And it's a long-lasting effort normally, yeah, with lots of questions to discuss. Yeah, oh, this is a crazy idea. Nobody will need that. Forget it. Yeah, or things like the technology isn't mature. Nice idea, but technology doesn't really serve that purpose. Yeah, or things like, this is a solution just searching for a problem. Yeah. So the idea of blockchain or machine learning and things like that, yeah, this is just a self-sufficient idea of using a certain technology, but there is no demand for that. That's the kind of discussions we all know when it comes to changing things, when it comes to introducing new technologies, when it comes to dealing with new technology. On the other thing is, oh, this is old wine in new skins, yeah. Also interesting. And last but not least, of course, oh, this is very scary. Yeah. On the one hand, maybe it's just emotionally, you know, like the old steam engines, the wild black iron thing full of fire and steam and stuff like that. People were scared in the mid of the 19th century about that. But on the other hand, of course, those steam engine and steam trains and all these things represented extremely important innovations for societies. Yeah? And today it's very nostalgic to just get on Sunday with your kids into that kind of steam train. That's how perception of technology, of course, changes over time and over the years. Yeah. But on the other hand, of course, we also need to discuss, okay, what impact does this have on society? Does it have the impact what we really want? Do we believe, is this good, or should we change the direction of things we're doing? But maybe most importantly, it is about, you don't know exactly where this innovation is going. So almost nobody is sitting down and say, okay, now I want to invent the next air taxi. Yeah, it's more like, okay, I got a certain idea, I want this thing to develop, I push things forward, but maybe it turns out that the result is totally different from what was intended in the very beginning. And that is really important when you really get into this adventure of using new technology, using new or implementing new ideas. And when you think about, okay, this is changing something. Yeah? I really believe this is really important. And again, as I said, this is a step-by-step process. And I believe conference like this is the place to discuss these things, these questions, and of course, also, let's say, the possibilities which are there. So on the one hand, I really like to invite all of you to discuss the potential of change and innovation through technologies, as we discuss here and at this place. Yeah. On the other hand, we shouldn't forget to look at the ethical challenges. Yeah. What especially all these things mean to us. And last but not least, of course, we want to focus on. We are a tech conference. We like to focus on technology and on possibilities. That's what we've prepared for you. And I'm really confident that the next 2 days provide plenty of opportunities to you to get new ideas, to get fresh ideas, to deepen your knowledge in certain technology. And last but not least, again, to discuss what's going on. What are we doing here? Does it lead to a direction what we like the things to go? And on the other hand, of course, how can I, let's say, get a sharper idea of in which way do I want to innovate and to change things? Having said that, we invited 64 speakers for this entire conference, and they deliver, in summary, 49 talks for this conference. Again, this is the combined thing between the Voice conference and the ML conference. Yeah? And again, please do not forget, you can visit both conference parts and whatever you want. Everything is open to you for the books, for the days you have booked. And with that, I'd like to hand over the stage to our very, very first speaker. And she is Dr. Janina Loh. She's a postdoc at the University of Vienna. She has published the first German introduction to trans and post-humanism. She's a philosopher of technology, a feminist researcher, and she's caring for the ethics in robotics. So please welcome Janina Loh.
Starting your day with a little bit of robot ethics. Thanks a lot for the invitation, and I will just, there's another, okay, you can't see it, that's good. Okay, so, as you already said, I'm a philosopher of technology, and I'm sort of specialized or an expert in robot ethics, and in 6 days, there will actually be the first German introduction to robot ethics published by the publisher Ikeup that I have written. And I'm here today not, well, hopefully not with too many very abstracts or deeply theoretical thoughts, although I know that you are broadly, I would say, not an academic public, so I hope that I have managed to bring together a couple of ideas or thoughts that are like easier to understand for a non-academic, non-philosophical public. So talking about robots and ethics in the digital age, this will be at least a short introduction to a field, the philosophical subdiscipline called robot ethics, and I will... This does not work, obviously. That's a good start. Let me just try if it will, because actually it does work. Okay, we had some technical problems in the early morning already, so this is just the next problem. Whatever, I will just do it this way, the old-fashioned way. So I will start with an introduction with the question, what do robots actually have to do with ethics? Because there are a lot of people who would say, also in the philosophical academic community, who would say that ethics actually just only and exclusively has something to do with humans. So what does ethical thinking and ethical challenges and ethical questions actually do have to do with robots? Or the other way around, what do robots have to do with ethics? And then second, I will introduce to you a couple of eras of robotics and related ethical questions. Thank you. And actually, I thought about Great. Thank you so much. Talking about like 3 eras of robotics. However, we, due to the time limit, I think I will just talk about robots in work and labor or the industry. And then actually I wanted to talk about robots in autonomous cars and the ethical questions relating to autonomous cars. However, I think I will skip that and come directly to the ethical questions concerning sex robots. And that is also a very interesting topic, I would guess, in the early morning hours of an interesting conference such as this is. Okay, and then in a third step, I very quickly want to talk about how to implement morality. So how does the morality can a specific morality or specific moral values or principles can be programmed into a machine. Of course, since I'm a philosopher and not a roboticist, there certainly are a lot of people in this room who might have a lot of more concrete ideas with regard to that third part of my talk. However, I will refer there to a book written by Wendell Wallach and Colin Allen in 2009 called Moral Machines, Teaching Robots Right from Wrong. And Wendell Wallach is a philosopher and Colin Allen is a roboticist. And they came together and worked out this approach, or these 3 approaches, how to build a language, so to speak, that both philosophers and roboticists can understand, and that makes sense in both of these disciplines. So maybe that, hopefully, this also makes sense to you guys. And I will conclude in the 4th part not only with like a conclusion of what I just said in the last couple of minutes, but also with a plea, trying to make some concrete efforts to what should happen actually from now on, or what should have happened actually much more earlier with regard to ethical questions in the digital age. Okay, starting with the introduction, what do robots have to do with ethics? I will proceed in 3 steps. I will first of all tell you a little bit about ethical systems and ethical traditions in the so-called Western culture. I will then differentiate between 2 types of ethical systems, and then, as philosophers always do, I will come down to define the fundamental terms that I use in the following. So, the very fundamental and absolute basic thing to know about ethics and robots is that wherever people are values. Human beings are normative beings. Whatever you want to define as a human action comes along with intentions and reasons and values. And that is why you can differentiate, for example, between human actions and animal pure behavior or instinct. Wherever people are values, because human beings are acting beings, are agents, and wherever there are actions, there are also values that implicitly or explicitly are the drive, the reasons for, define the drives and reasons for that specific actions. So actions are never morally neutral. Of course, there are also other ethical values, such as political values, economic values, or aesthetic values, religious values, but also there are always ethical values that define the frame for, or the fundament for an action. So actions are never morally neutral, nor are the products of human actions, such as technologies. So technology is never neutral. As a product of human action, and as I just said, human actions are never neutral, so are the technologies produced by human beings never morally neutral. So Ethics as a discipline asks what the good life is and how people should live together. First of all, how they should behave towards each other and which values should play a role in the human-human interaction. So that is the very fundamental discipline, the academic discipline also, the discipline of ethics. It has to do with human beings and with human beings alone. Of course, there are a lot of different ethical systems, not only in the so-called Western culture, but also globally, of course, but also in one society. There are different ethical systems or different schools or traditions, as you might call them, and I have just listed the three most important here. There are also in the German-speaking countries more ethical systems than those three that I just show on this slide. However, these might be the most fundamental or the most important ones. First of all, there's virtue ethics that most of you would probably concern with a philosopher called Aristotle. Here, with regard to virtue ethics, the moral value of an action is determined by the character of a person, if the person acts in a specific way. The second set, or the second tradition of ethics in the so-called Western culture is deontological ethics. And most people would refer to Immanuel Kant when talking about deontological ethics. It comes from the Greek term deon, obligation, duty. Here, the moral value of an action is determined by the intention of a person, what a person specifically does and why the person does that. And third, there is consequentialism with a very important subset of ethical systems called utilitarianism, from Latin utilitas, utility. Most people refer to Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill when talking about consequentialism, or especially utilitarianism. Here, the moral value of an action is determined by the consequences of the action in question. For example, you have, imagine, well, philosophers have always these very explicit or extreme examples. Imagine you have two burning houses, and in the one house there is a kindergarten with, like, let's say 100 children that have like their life ahead of them and that are very young and might have a lot of people who would feel very sorry or feel very sad when these children would die. On the other hand, you have the burning house with like a home for elder care, and there might be like 10 people who would die in this fire, and also people who are very old and they already had their whole life. Apologies for the very extreme example. And consequentialists would say, now you should, okay, and you can only rescue the people in one of these houses. You cannot rescue both. And consequentialists, and especially utilitarianists, would now say you should rescue those people who actually are more people, who might have more happiness in their life, or have much more like chances to affect the lives of other people. And therefore utilitarianists would probably say that that the morally correct action in this case would be to rescue the 100 children in the kindergarten and not the 10 people in the home for elderly care, because the 100 children are more than the 10 people, as simply more people, and that's better to rescue them. And they have their whole life ahead of them, and not like the 10 old people who have already lived a long and probably, hopefully, happy life. So, and none of you, and none of the academic philosophers, and none of the academic ethicists do strictly act according to one of these ethical systems. All of us, we merge these ethical systems in our everyday life, and also our jurisdictional system, it also merges in part, at least, these ethical systems and probably other ethical systems as well. The bottom line here is there's no way to determine what ethical system is the best one. There's no such way you could do this. This is not an empirical question. It's not a question that you can, with like lots of study, come to a specific conclusion to say that, for example, deontological ethics or consequentialism is the only and best ethical system. So there is no such way. Maybe you can keep that in mind. So the next thing is there are two types of ethical systems for specific situations, one could say. The first is there are ethical systems for the interaction with non-human beings. For example, with animals, that would be animal ethics. With plants, that would be plant ethics. And with the environment, that would be environmental ethics. And also there are specific ethical systems for specific human domains where maybe other values or other principles are at stake, or where ethical values do play a role, a larger role that does not play such a huge role in everyday life. For example, medicine ethics, or international politics, for example, ethics of war, ethics of humanitarian intervention, and the like. So, and as you can see very quickly, hopefully, is that robot ethics is a comparatively young philosophical discipline for the interaction with artificial systems, or robots, especially an example for those ethical systems collected under A. The philosophical discipline of robots, and this is the last bullet point on this slide, this is maybe a very short definition of what the academic discipline of robot ethics does. The philosophical discipline of robot ethics deals with the moral normative criteria that play a role in the construction of robots, in dealing with robots, and in the relationship between humans and robots. Of course, the term robot has not a very long tradition, but it is interesting if you are if you are interested in the very first person who coined the term, so to speak. It was coined by Josef Čapek, and especially his brother Karel Čapek used it in a theater play called Rossum's Universal Robots in 1921. And the interesting thing is that, well, it's about 50 pages. You should absolutely read it, because the questions that arise there, or that Karel Čapek poses there, are still relevant today when it comes to Industry 4.0 and the digitalization and automatization of our work and our world of work and labor. Because the term robot derives from the Czech word robota, still don't know if I spelled correctly, for compulsory labor. And Karel Čapek used it for humanoid apparatuses that do services in place of humans in his stage play or theater play, Rossum's Universal Robots. When I talk about a robot, I understand it as an electromechanical machine with a body, and that is important. It has a robot is always embedded. It has always a body, and of course, in a philosophical discussion, you could ask specifically, what is a body? Does Alexa have a body, for example, or not? Where does a body start, so to speak, or where does embeddedness start, and where does it end? A robot also needs one or multiple processors, sensors that collect data, and an effector or an actuator that translate signals into mostly mechanical operations. Of course, a lot of people here in this room know much more about these criteria, B, C, and D, as I. The robot's behavior, E, is, or at least appears to a certain degree, autonomous. It can therefore act on the environment in a way that, for example, a computer cannot. And with regard to criteria E, to the autonomy, for example, a drone would not be called a robot, because a drone is mostly, at least those drones I know, are mostly like driven by external forces, by direct human interaction, and cannot act on themselves. Of course, we also talk a lot about other, I would say, relatives and acquaintances in robot ethics, such as, of course, artificial intelligence, that actually does not necessarily have to be embodied, and therefore it is it is something different than a robot would be. We also, of course, talk about algorithms as computation and linguistic rules or actions, the so-called, metaphorically speaking, mental behavior patterns or learned processes of a robot. But this is just to give you a feeling for what philosophers do when they actually define a specific term, and then with that definition, also show the so-called gray areas that that show the specific cases in which maybe it is not that easy to define what a robot is. In the case of Alexa, for example, is Alexa again a robot or not? Okay, I will quickly come to, well, actually, I wanted to talk about 3 different areas of robotics and related ethical questions, just to give you an impression of what we do here. I think I will just start with the first and then skip the second. I will just have a very quick look at my watch. Okay, yeah, I will definitely skip 1 or 2 of these in order to come to the next part. Of course, this is also a very individual selection. This is a selection of topics that I personally focus on in my work. I'm not primarily interested in all of these numerous robots in these numerous dimensions of human life, but I personally focus on robots and work or labor. I'm very interested in autonomous driving and also in sex robotics, and of course you find also lots of robots in the military sector, in the medical sector, in therapy and care, in education, in the arts as toys, etc. This is my personal focus that I would like to present here very quickly at least. So, talking about robots and works, labor, I will give you just a very short state of the art here. Already in this original understanding, in the Czech term, that the Czech term robota, where the term robot derives from, this original understanding, the idea of robots as artificial slaves from the Slavic root rab, for slave, is anchored. So Čapek's visions are, the very core of the so-called Industry 4.0, as I just said, the technological transformation of human work and labor through digitalization, automatization, via interlinked algorithmic systems that can largely refrain from direct interaction with people. And I just see that I have this point twice on this slide. I don't know why. Whatever. You might focus on the last bullet point. Robots are built primarily for the purpose of taking over work which is thought of, at least thought of, as being uninteresting for humans due to their so-called 3Ds. That means this work is thought to be dull, dangerous, and dirty. And especially with regard to these types of work, robots should be come into play. Of course, there are a lot of philosophical and specifically ethical questions related to that. However, these questions are not very new ones, so to speak. There are a lot of philosophers who already, a couple of hundreds of years ago, posed these questions. People such as Marx, for example, because the questions that do arise here are, very, very fundamental and do not arise specifically because we now have these crazy robots that danger the human work world, so to speak. The first question, the obvious one, is which value does work in general have for us? Why would we want to work? What meaning does work have for us? Do we only and explicitly do it for being able to live and to buy stuff, or does it have maybe another value for us? Maybe we want to give back something to society, or maybe it has a deeper, more complex meaning for our personal lives. Then second, under what conditions are we willing to carry out what activities and to what extent? And that from that follows directly the third question, what is good work and what is alienated work? Again, the name Marx should rise in the back of your mind, at least here when it comes to that question, because Marx, of course, did a lot of work, especially on what is alienated work. Also, Marx already posed the question of how does the human life and human society changes when we have the big industry, where people merely do work for the machines and not vice versa. So again, this is a actually very old philosophical question. What is repetitive work, and why should people not be allowed to do it on request at least? Why is there anybody who could tell me that something is so dull or so repetitive, so boring, that I'm not allowed to talk about that, to do this work any longer? Who decides which work should be done by robots and why? Very important question. Who's the authority here to decide that? What changes, especially in education, would a society have to undergo in order to adequately prepare future generations for the age of automation? Because our educational system is mostly built or structured for preparing the next generations for work and labor in our societies. What also feminist challenges are we confronted with at the interface of work in the age of automation, robotics, and people who define themselves as women? Especially that point is interesting because there are a lot of works today that are mostly done by people who understand themselves as women and who not get paid for that work. And what changes in our societies when these forms of work are now done by robots? What happened to the people who before that time had done this work? And last but not least, how can we think of a society without work and, for example, on the basis of a basic income? So, and because I do not have so much time left, I not only have to skip the second part of here, but also, unfortunately, the sex robot part although I always love that, especially that. However, as you can see on every slide, no, not that slide, but every other slide, there are my contact information just on top of that. And if you're interested in especially in autonomous driving and sex robots, you can just send me an email, and I'm happy to send you the presentation. And of course, if you have other questions also relating to the parts that I talk about, but also related to the parts that I did not have the time to talk about. But I think this part might also be like interesting in terms of how can we put, so to speak, ethical systems into robots. There are mostly three approaches in the community that people refer to here. First of all, the top-down approaches. That means the implementation of a series of ethical principles or any other principles, to be fair, or rules according to which the robot is guided in a situation in question. For example, well, a lot of people still talk about Isaac Asimov's 3 or 4 laws of robotics, the 10 commandments you can imagine, or maybe Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, or other ethical principles. If you top-down implement these principles, then the robot is not able to break free from these principles, so to speak. It is not able to learn. It is only to act according to these principles or not act at all. Another set of approaches is called the bottom-up approaches. Here, the discussion is merely focused on learning algorithms and evolutionary algorithms. Here, roboticists design robots that look like children, and I will show you in a short video. I will show you one example for these. Here, the intention is to build robots in a way that they might be able to learn, such as human children are able to learn. And it is called bottom-up because here the principles and also the ethical principles are not like top-down pre-programmed, but the robot itself should be able, via trial and error, via learning, to be able to come to a set of rules that will help it in further situations to guide through. And of course, there are always hybrid approaches that merge top-down and bottom-up approaches. But to conclude this with a little bit of video idea, so to speak, wanted to show you at first an example for a top-down programmed robot called Bless You Two. It is a communication art project of the media artist Alexander Wiedekind-Klein, and it has been designed for the World Exhibition of the Reformation in Wittenberg in 2017. I always say that beforehand because there are actually some people who are like very skeptical when they see this robot, but it is actually really just a communication art project. Okay.
Guten Tag. Hello. Bonjour. Kann ich Sie segnen? Can I bless you? Bitte wählen Sie eine Sprache. Please choose a language.
It's nice to meet you. Would you like to be blessed by a female or a male voice?
Male voice.
Fine. Which blessing do you need?
Renewal.
May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Go forth in the peace of God. Would you like to print out your blessing?
Okay, that should be enough. Um, I hope that that you just that you just understand why this is an example for a top-down programmed robot. This robot cannot learn; it cannot swear instead of bless. So, for example, it can only do what the people does on the interface, so to speak. It well, it cannot, it cannot do anything else. So. The second example, I don't have a video, unfortunately, but there are a lot of very sweet videos on YouTube, longer videos. This is also an example for a top-down programmed robot, the therapy assistant system built by Takanori Shibata, the robot seal Paro. And it is used in therapy, especially with people who are suffering from dementia, because those people often tend to isolate themselves from other human beings and their human carers and open up to the robot seal. And that is so with interacting with the robot seal, the human carers and therapists can come to conclusions and have information about the people who are interacting with the robot seal that they would not have without the robot seal. And this robot can also not learn. It is not able to do a lot. It is just there, like it reacts to external stimuli. It can blink with its eyes, and it can do it has noises, for example, but nothing much more. And that is also a very good example for a top-down programmed robot. Last but not least, I wanted to show you a very quick video for an example for a bottom-up programmed robot. This is Ikeup, a learning model designed by Giorgio Metta, and it is designed after a 2 to 4 year old child. Right, and it has certain capabilities like crawling, facial expression, grasping small objects, and very interesting also for ethicists, archery. And after that, I will come to my conclusion. So looking to the people who hold these signs up to me. Yeah, thank you. So this is without tone, so I can maybe talk about while you watch it. As you can see, this is also an example for a child robot. There are, of course, very different examples for this field of evolutionary robotics, and a lot of people here in this room, again, I think know this much better than I do. And it is also a very good and popular example for a robot that is able in a fairly good way to machinically learn. And this what you can see, what it does right now is not trivial. Again, as a lot of people in this room already know, I would say, because to analyze an object in terms of its structure and shape, and after that to decide how to grip it, is not an easy thing to do. It is something that humans learn via, I don't know, couple of years. And this robot also has needed lots of time to decide with regard to a specific object object, how to deal with it, how to use it, how to grab it and move it around. But this is not the. This is of course a very sweet part of the video. I always love to watch it, but this is not the most important or the interesting one in terms of ethical learning. Here it is actually the reason why I primarily showed you this video, because here you see a human being showing Ikeup what to do with these box and the cereals in it. I think those are cereals, or should be cereals, and Ikeup is able to imitate via trial and error to try to put the cereals into the cup. And of course, this is, at least in this situation, not an ethical challenge or an ethical questions, but hopefully you can see the path that arises here, that with machine learning, robots such as Ikeup might be one day able to be in situations where they would have to decide with regard to specifically ethical challenges. Okay. In the first part, I talked to you a little bit about the fundamental terms and questions that the philosophical discipline of robot ethics is concerned with. I also defined the term robot as an electromechanical machine with a body, a processor, tensors, effects, autonomy, and influence. In the second part, I had just time, unfortunately, to talk about one area of robotics and the related ethical questions. However, I hope that in showing you this one area of robotics, it might now be easier to see what other ethical questions arise in other areas of robotics. So, and in the last part, the third part, I talked to you about 3 different approaches to show how moral can be implemented, and that means top-down, bottom-up, or in the hybrid form of approaches. And I will conclude with this last slide with a plea, so to speak, because it is my opinion that we need responsibility and, on at least 5 social levels to raise a critical awareness of the ethical issues involved in dealing with technology, and specifically when it comes to my field of expertise in dealing with robots. Of course, we already need it on the level of the personal individual moral actions, starting with children that should think about why using, for example, Amazon, or why putting their data on Facebook and the like. But we also need it in ethics and computer education in schools. We also need it in the universities and training institutions of the technical sciences, where I think up to this date ethical questions do not play such a huge role. And we also need it in the form of obligatory training courses for enterprises and firms. So that means for those people who already have had their education and who build robots and technologies and sell them on the market. And last but not least, we also need it in the form of ethics committees and similar institutional bodies on the meta or political level, so to speak. And with that, I will close. Thank you very much for your interest and attention, and for those of you who are able to at least read maybe German, the last book on this slide, this is the Introduction to Robot Ethics that will be published in a couple of days. And for those of you who are not able to read German, I have a couple of English papers on my homepage. Some of them are free for download. So if you are interested in these topics, also responsibility with regard to robot ethics, you might find something there. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much,